I have been representing families and disabled individuals over 20 years. There was an attorney that I was representing who was struggling to get coverage for his parents who had long-term care insurance, and he couldn't maneuver the process, couldn't get through the process, and kept getting denial after denial after denial. He asked me to take a look at it, and I was shocked by what I saw. Each time, there was no valid reason for the denial. They just kept delaying the process and moving it forward. Insurance companies know that most people have never looked at a long-term care insurance policy. They know that the people that they sold it to probably never read it and do not understand the terms in that policy. About 70% of people that reach the age of 65 will require some long-term care in the remaining year.
Hello, friend. Welcome. I'm your host, Carline Cadet Francois with Florida Assisted Living Consulting. We help busy professionals turn buildings into thriving licensed assisted living communities. We build communities. We have the Thriving Circle community. If you haven't been in there, you may want to take a look. It's the cheapest way to get direct access to me every month. We also host the annual Assisted Living Caregivers Conference. Take a look in the description. Register today because it usually sells out. Today we are here with an amazing guest, and I'm so excited to have her here. We had her partner here on one of the episodes. Take a look at it. And I'm excited to welcome Alicia Paulino-Grisham. She is the founding partner for Paulino-Grisham, Smith and Schmerlar's Disability Insurance Group. With decades of experience, she represents individuals fighting denials or delayed disability, life insurance, health, and long-term care insurance claim. Alicia has been featured on Good Morning America for her work in protecting families, especially those caught off guard when insurance doesn't deliver during a crisis. She is passionate about educating caregivers, healthcare workers, and senior living professionals on how to protect themselves and their loved ones when their insurance companies fail to keep their promise. Oh my God, that is such a mouthful, but empowering at the same time. I feel like I can just call you, you're like Superwoman. Alicia, welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind words. I have been representing families and disabled individuals my entire career. Over 20 years ago, I started in a medium-sized firm handling disability insurance claims, and very quickly started getting into life and long-term care claims. And it's just because there was an attorney that I was representing who was struggling to get coverage for his parents who had long-term care insurance, and he couldn't maneuver the process, couldn't get through the process, and kept getting denial after denial after denial. He asked me to take a look at it, and I was shocked by what I saw. Each time, there was no valid reason for the denial. They just kept delaying the process and moving it forward. And really, they were misapplying the elimination period. They were misapplying the terms in the policy. All of these things were happening. And this was an attorney struggling with this.
Wow.
So we ended up resolving that claim for him. Both of his parents were receiving the care that they deserved under the policy. And then after that, I started getting referrals from other attorneys who handle like wills and trusts and things like that, that they had clients that needed help. And from there, long-term care has become one of our main practice areas.
Wow, that is so amazing. So it was another attorney that you ended up helping.
Yes.
That is so profound, because someone like me would probably be lost. And I'm pretty sure most of you watching, you're like, I'd be lost too. But it's profound to hear that your first case was a fellow attorney.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Insurance companies know that most people have never looked at a long-term care insurance policy. They know that the people that they sold it to probably never read it and do not understand the terms in that policy. And attorneys think, they know everything. But if you don't practice in this area of the law, it's daunting and it's difficult. And there are different, sometimes Sometimes federal law applies, sometimes state law applies. So if you're not used to handling insurance benefit cases, it's pretty difficult to navigate.
Well, that's nice to know that fellow attorneys also struggle with this, so we feel like we're normal people. That is amazing to hear that your first case was a fellow lawyer, which makes people like me and my audience watching feel very normal. Since you've been at the front line fighting insurance companies for years, why is this issue especially important for seniors, caregivers, and ALF owners?
About 70% of people that reach the age of 65 will require some long-term care in the remaining years. And about half of those people will require paid help at some point. 24% of people are going to need at least 2 years in some sort of facility, and 15% will need even longer. And so the expenses can be astronomical, and it can completely devastate an individual's savings. So for seniors, a claim denial can mean financial devastation, losing everything that they've saved over the years, or it can mean going without treatment that they desperately need, or going without care that they desperately need. For caregivers, especially in the sandwich generation, for caregivers, it could mean going without help. That can be emotionally devastating as well as financially devastating. And for ALF owners, it could mean not being able to give the care to certain patients for a significant segment of the population. So claim denials in the long-term care policy have real life consequences for seniors, ALF owners, and caregivers.
You said a lot here, because for ALF owners, for family members, we come across so many different issues when it comes to caring for the senior. Then we end up caring for the family members because we become a trusted source that they can ask for information, ask for referrals. What should I do about this, and that? And then it's funny to hear that there are different ways of handling long-term care insurance. And based on your experience, if someone's listening to this, what is long-term care insurance? I know we had an episode with Mendy. You can catch it here. They are from the same law firm. But what is long-term care insurance?
Long-term care insurance is insurance that people have purchased. Sometimes they get it through work. Those are group policies, but the majority of long-term care policies are private policies that you buy through, insurance agent. And it's supposed to be there when you need long-term care. It's not always just for seniors. It's not always just for an aging individual. Sometimes people have car accidents. Sometimes people have major illnesses that leave them needing long-term care. Now, usually under these policies, if you cannot perform at least 2 activities of daily living, bathing, transferring, toileting, eating, things like that, and you need assistance performing those activities of daily living, or even just standby assistance where it's not safe, then you are eligible for long-term care under these policies. Now, some of the policies will provide benefits for a certain set of time, 2 years, sometimes it's longer, and other policies will be a lifetime policy. But those policies also often have maximum lifetime benefits. So when you reach that, then you no longer are eligible for additional benefits under the policy. But it's there to protect you when you need those services and to cover those expenses.
That's good to know, because we know that Florida happens to be number 1 for senior care, and that comes with a lot of rewards, but also a lot of challenges, things that needs to be taken care of. And for families in the sandwich generations, caring for their children while juggling, taking care of mom and dad, what are the most common surprises that they face when insurance claims get denied?
I would say the most common surprise is the actual denial itself. So, especially for the sandwich generation that you were just speaking of, when you're taking care of children and an aging parent, and you know that the parent has long-term care, the idea is help is on the way. And, you're going to have the assistance you need. Most people never read their parents' long-term care policy, so they don't actually know what coverage is in there, and it can vary significantly. So many times, just applying for the benefit and then getting denied is the biggest surprise. And there's also a surprise when there's sort of this mismatch between their expectations of what's covered and the actual policy language. And there's a surprise when they start running up against the insurance companies' unreasonable proof requirements or their interpretations of policy language that they never anticipated they would have to deal with.
And as stressful as that is to be a sandwich generation child, it's stressful enough. And I can see how they don't have the time to actually read that document. And those documents are usually very thick, right? It's a lot of information in it. And even if, for example, you end up reading those type of information, because some words or some language are very industry specific. And so you may end up reading it, but then you don't understand what you're reading. So would you say that it's helpful that they reach out to you if they need someone to review their paperwork?
Absolutely. We will review somebody's paperwork. It's a free consultation to go through the paperwork. We never require payment for something like that. You should know what's inside your policy. You should know what's covered. You should know how the policy and the provisions are applied. And one thing I think that people should understand is when these policies were written, they were written purposefully ambiguously. So a lot of the terms aren't defined, or they are subject to two different meanings. But under the law, an ambiguous term is supposed to be interpreted against the insurance company and in favor of the insured. But the insurance company is never going to tell you that. They're going to apply an interpretation and say that this is what it means. And most people never question it. They just assume, well, they wrote the policy, they should know better. And so never take an insurance company's interpretation of a term, as gospel. And the reason for that is because, especially in a policy with ambiguous terms, it's supposed to be decided against the insurance company and in favor of the insured, who didn't have an option to write that policy or to add wording or to add protections for themselves when they purchased it.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear, because I would think they put those words for a reason, and the judges and everybody knows that it is not to protect the insured. And it's comforting to hear that protection is for the insured in that case. And did y'all hear? She said she will review your paperwork for free. I just want to highlight this right quick, because resources and having the right people to help you, to guide you, is priceless. And we know that a lot of people may be on a budget for things, but then when you hear she's going to review your paperwork to help you, that is an expensive service that she is providing at no fee. Okay, so use it. Don't keep that information just to yourself. Share it with your family members, share it with your friends. And just because we are young doesn't mean that we should not educate ourselves. As a matter of fact, that is the time to educate yourselves, because you end up helping yourself, helping your family members, helping everyone within your realm. So take that information, share it, don't keep it to yourself. With all of that said, I think we can assume some of the pitfalls insurance companies set up for, to not pay. What are some pitfalls that you can tell the audience to avoid?
That's a great subject because there are so many. The first is what I call deceptive practices to try and limit coverage. So years ago, starting in the 70s to the 80s and 90s, insurance companies were selling these policies freely and cheaply. They were selling them to everyone, and they never anticipated having to pay these many claims. And that's because people are living longer. They just didn't anticipate this. So they're losing money on these policies. So one of the things that they are doing is trying to trick people into limiting their own coverage. One of the tactics that they use is they will go to an aging individual and say, you know, we know you're on a fixed budget. We know that premiums are not easy. We'll offer to lower your premiums for you.
Wow.
And they think that that's an amazing offer. And really, it would be if they weren't giving something up. And usually, it is giving something up significantly. So we've seen cases where an individual had a life benefit and they lowered their premiums, not by much, by a little, and they lowered the coverage to 2 years. And
Wow.
really, after a significant period of time, there's not much that can be done in that case if they've lowered it and there isn't an issue of, you know, dementia or something like that. Another way that they lower coverage is somebody that's already receiving benefits and a certain service isn't covered under their policy, but they inquire about it. And so the insurance company will say, well, we'll give you an alternative plan of care because we're nice, but you're going to have to sign this document. And again, they're lowering, you know, significantly the maximum benefit under the policy or the lifetime coverage or something like that. And a lot of times families do not read the full, you know, document. They just think it's wonderful that their mother is going to get in-home care instead of, you know, something else, and they sign it away. And there's not much that can be done there. So that's something I think everybody that has these policies needs to look out for. Again, going back, we had an attorney that this happened to, their parent, and they didn't know their parent signed it away because she never mentioned it until later when she needed the care. They realized that the policy was limited. So that's one of the steps that they take to try and lower or limit coverage. Now, there are also steps to try and deny or delay paying claims. Probably the most common one is slow walking a case through till the person gets so frustrated that they give up or something else happens. They don't get the care and ultimately pass away, you know, and nobody ends up fighting that claim. Slow walking a claim is very common. That is when, you know, they're asking over and over for the same documentation. They're asking for irrelevant documentation. You know, this is a dementia claim and they're asking for, you know, 15 years ago, the gynecologist records of that individual that have nothing to do with their current condition. They will say that they lost documents, say that the documents never showed up, those kind of things. That's one of the main tactics. One of the other tactics I would say is misrepresenting the policy terms. And that is very common. They'll say certain services are not covered that are clearly covered under the policy. Well, where they'd say that one of the most common things is to misrepresent the elimination period and how the elimination period is applied. An elimination period is just the amount of time that covered person has to pay out of pocket for the services. So it could be, you know, 6 weeks to 6 months, but the covered person has to receive the services and pay out of pocket before the benefits will start to kick in. So an insurance company will also misapply how you start counting towards that elimination period so that it's this endless cycle where coverage never begins. That's a very common thing. You know, if it looks like they're misapplying the elimination period or, you know, you don't understand why it keeps restarting, you really need to stop, take a look at the elimination period. And you know, sometimes I say at that point, you might want to seek help because, you know, something is going wrong in your claim. Another way that they try to deny claims is taking advantage of a lapsed policy. And what that means is occasionally, especially when somebody is suffering from dementia, they miss payment. Or again, going back to the sandwich generation, you're juggling kids and taking care of your parent, and you might miss a bill and you forgot to pay it. Many of the policies have a grace period in it, but the insurance company won't tell you that. So if you just pay the premiums that were missed, you can get the coverage back in place. And certain states have protections under the law to prevent an insurance company from denying, you know, on lapse policy under certain circumstances. For example, in Florida, we have a statute that if the lapse was due to somebody suffering from dementia, they can go back 5 months. If they pay the premiums all that policy has to be reinstated. So insurance companies won't necessarily tell you that, but it's something that you should know. And I would say the other most common reason for denial recently, it's a trend that is actually happening more commonly these days, is accusing individuals of fraud, using surveillance to scare both caregivers and the insured patient. And a lot of times the surveillance video doesn't really show that much, but it's terrifying. It's terrifying to an aging individual that they've been followed, their caregiver, and the insurance company is saying they're committing insurance fraud. So a lot of those people just go away. So that's one of the newest denial tactics that we've been seeing an uptick of.
That is notorious. Could you imagine? Seniors are already like afraid of everybody. Could you imagine someone following them around or pulling up surveillance? That is terrifying, and it's sad to hear that, but it's also a reward to be educated about it way in advance so that these are the tactics that they use. And if you need to make any changes to your insurance, the tactics that they use. Hire a professional. Let them know what you're trying to do. They know the insurance language and all their tactics, and they can better guide you as to what you need to do. That's the best way that I would recommend. But to hear all of those tactics that they use, even following the seniors around and those sandwich generation caregivers, some of them are so stressed out. I spoke with one, literally, like, she was juggling life and a 5-year-old son and grandma's having issues. And it's just like the level of overwhelm. And then to hear when they finally need the help, that all of this likely to happen to them is just very sad. But it's rewarding to see you stepping in that shoes and saying, hey, you don't have to deal with all of this because I can help you do that. And I think that is amazing to hear. So if someone's listening to all of this, you're like, okay, elimination period. How does the insurance get activated? How do one begin to use the insurance?
Okay. So typically long-term care policies vary significantly, but we'll give you the overall look at it. Most long-term care policies, if you're unable to perform at least 2 ADLs, activities of daily living, you should qualify for it. Now, some policies will cover both physical and cognitive issues, and some policies will exclude cognitive issues. So you have to be very careful to know what is covered under your policy or your parents' policy. When it becomes necessary to apply for benefits, when you need assistance with at least 2 ADLs, you want to know what's in your policy before you do anything. You want to understand what's covered, because that's where, you're talking to your doctor and you're explaining what's going on. And because your doctor's not at home with you. Your doctor doesn't know that you need assistance bathing or you need assistance getting, transferring from chair to chair, things like that. So you need to know what's in your policy and have a conversation with your doctor. Now, with cognitive issue, if that's covered under the policy, many policies required standardized testing. So, that's something that you need to talk to your doctor about as well, because most primary care physicians do not perform neuropsychological testing or cognitive functional assessments. They could do like the mini mental evaluation, things like that, but they're not doing some of the standardized testing that is actually required under these policies. Now, most of the policies will not say which type of standardized testing they need. So there is variation there. And if you have an insurance company that is requiring a certain examination and it's not listed in the policy, you can push back there. So that's one thing that you have to consider. Know what's in the policy, know how to speak to your doctors about it. And once all of that's in place, then you can ask for the claim forms. You can ask for the claim package, which is a claimant statement explaining that you cannot perform certain ADLs. Your doctor has to certify that you cannot perform certain ADLs. And then there's going to be, you need to get your records. You need to show your records. You might want to get statements from your actual caregiver. If you had a caregiver at that time, sometimes these things just, people go without the assistance that they need. And so they don't have a caregiver to write a statement. But if you do, if you have a child at home that is taking care of you, or if you, had a friend, which happens quite frequently in your community, that comes over and helps you with meals or getting in and out of the bath and things like that, you can get a statement from them. And then the process starts. Usually there will be a nurse assessment by the insurance company, which we always recommend to have your caregiver there, an attorney, and your own nurse. For our clients, we send either an attorney or a nurse to be at those assessments because they don't always ask the right questions. They don't always document what is occurring fully. And it's important to have another set of eyes there for when the insurance company is evaluating. They might do, or usually they'll do, a medical review of the file and make a determination from there. And then you want to get the, if you're dealing with an ALF, you want to get, the daily activities log that shows that they're helping with at least 2 ADLs and that they're giving assistance, and submit that all to the insurance company.
Wow. Us ALF administrators, we're thinking, so paperwork wise, that 1823 health assessment form, if you're listening to this, and those are some of the paperwork that needs to be in place so that you can help the family show, look, your mom need help. That 1823 form will come a long way. So make sure, of course, during admissions time, this paperwork should be readily available. But sometimes as a ALF consultant, I come across those files and the 1823 forms are not properly signed. So part of the ways that you can help the family members is to also make sure your paperwork are intact. Because when they need to show proof, some of your paperwork, like the plan of care, all of this paperwork, you can easily give to the family member, and that will help them to save a step. Talking more about paperwork, what other paperwork should caregivers have in place so that when they are in need of proving all of those proofs, that they have a list of documentation that they already have in order so that they can use it to defend themselves?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people, because this doesn't always happen gradually, sometimes it happens immediately, but one of the things that we always talk about is start to talk, like for a caregiver, start to talk about what documents are going to be necessary later on. Durable power of attorneys for medical decisions and for financial decisions are necessary. Make sure that your living will is up to date and that, you've discussed all the things that might need to occur for, end of life decisions. Durable DNRs, do not resuscitate. If that is something that the individual is, thinking about, we need to have that already completed and all of that paperwork. It's also necessary to take a look at your beneficiary designations, your life insurance designation, your 401k, if that's still, and things like your bank account. All of those things have beneficiary designations that you want to make sure are up to date. A lot of times people forget to change them year after, and situations change, marriages change sometimes, all of these things. So you want to make sure that everything is up to date on a pretty continuous basis. Periodically go back and look at that. I know family members that their kids aged out at 18 and they still haven't changed, certain things in their will. And so it's important that we take a look at that. One of the easiest things to do is to keep like an index of all of your paperwork so that, and have the documents all together in one area in a safe place. But that's for just starting the process. Now that's just before the process starts. Now, to start the process of applying for a benefit, things that you might need are physician statements. Go to your doctor and get a detailed narrative of why, the patient needs this assistance. What is the diagnosis, and what are the needs, and what are the dangers if they do not have this assistance? That's important. I always recommend, a detailed statement from the caregiver if there is one, or a day in the life video for many cases. This is especially necessary in cases where the issue is cognitive, where the patient is suffering from dementia, and part of the time there is no issue, but you can show how many times you have to prompt them to take their medicine, and show how you have to remind them to eat and things like that. So day in the life videos are very helpful in these cases. And then the last thing I would say is, if you are asked to have a nurse assessment at any point, make sure that you have somebody else there and you have somebody documenting what's going on.
I love that, because those paperwork, we had a guest on the show, Andy Rosenberg. You can catch that video here. He went over all of those documents that you need to prep yourself to set your families so they can help you. You can catch that video right here. But Andy covered a lot of those documentations and how to structure them, all of those things. So you can catch that video. It's easy to pay them, right? It's easy to pay the insurance companies. But when it's time to actually activate the help, it is messy. So what are some procedures that you've used in general to help families appeal, to help families get some of those coverages that they're entitled to?
So one of the things is, some families come to us prior to a denial, and they just want us to help them through the process. They don't want to be slow walked through the process, or they already found themselves in that slow walking situation. So we come in to stop it. We, gather all of the paperwork. We let them know what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. We evaluate the policy language. We detail that in a letter to the insurance company and why this is covered. We get statements from the doctors. During the nurse assessments, we attend, and we also send a nurse over to attend. Another thing, one of the common reasons for a denial is people just do not know the proof that's required under the policy. Like we were saying, in cases with cognitive impairments, and they have coverage under their long-term care policy, sometimes standardized testing is required. Sometimes specific standardized testing is required. Those are very rare, but and they just don't have it. And the insurance company is just saying there's not objective proof of this. And they just keep denying over and over based on that. And until somebody lets them know, okay, we have to go out and get this testing, then they just think that they're in this denial loop. So we'll send them out for either neuropsychological testing, cognitive functional assessment, or we'll talk to their doctor and tell them to do certain evaluations to give the objective proof that the insurance company is required. So it might be as easy as talking to the doctor or sending them out separately to an evaluation. For physical conditions, sometimes they won't just take the doctor's statement and the records and approve on that. So we'll do things like send them to a functional capacity evaluation, showing that they cannot perform at least 2 ADLs. We'll do day in the life videos. All of those things will be submitted in a comprehensive package. We'll outline if there are state law protections, we'll outline that. And if there is a denial, in many cases, what we'll do is we'll submit a demand, and at the same time file a complaint with the state insurance commissioner. In Florida, it's called a civil remedy notice. You can do that online, file a complaint, outline everything that's going on, and they have 60 days to, pay the claim, or they could be subjected to punitive damages.
I'm sorry, hold on.
It's okay.
I'm doing my podcast. You have children?
Yes.
Oh my God. I'm just like, you just show up and you're like, and I'm like, I'm recording. And then
Yes.
you're like, yeah, I'm going to the store. hear the part where I said I was recording and that my guest is speaking? I'm so on a school day, like you should be at school.
You should be at school.
I'm sorry, I had to let you in on that because I'm just thinking, what's up with teenagers?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that is profound. And putting these packets together, what are some mistakes that you see families doing, and what can they do differently to save themselves some headaches?
One of the things is not talking to their doctor ahead of time, not reading the policy, understanding the terms, and going to the doctor and really talking about what's going on. And there's just a disconnect there. And so the records are not reflecting it because, a lot of times, people are stoic and they don't complain about everything that's going on. They don't tell them that they have to have their daughter there while they're in the shower, or that they're having difficulty, getting out of a chair without assistance. So that's not directly in the records. So it's important for both seniors and their caregivers to have that conversation with the doctor. Let them know what's going on, document it, and get that documentation in the record. A lot of times we'll have, all of this will happen. A caregiver will come to their parents' doctor's appointment, and the caregiver will go to their parents' doctor's appointment, and they will start telling the doctor what happens. And then he'll fill out the form and say, this individual needs assistance with at least 2 activities of daily living. And the insurance company will deny the claim saying, well, how did this happen? Nothing in your form or record says anything about this. You gave her an examination and she was fine. She wasn't having, it doesn't say anything about mobility issues. It doesn't say anything about being unsafe. So what occurred in between this visit and the last visit? And really nothing. It was a gradual progression that just wasn't documented. So you really need to try and get that info. If you know an issue is happening, to try and get it into the record, into the medical records. Also, being there with the doctor to fill out the form can be very helpful because the doctor doesn't know all of the activities of daily living that you have to help them with, and that they're going to need care for. So that's something that's really important to do, is understand the policy, understand what's covered, and then talk to the doctor about what's really going on.
We find that seniors don't always tell their loved ones what's going on with them until something happens, and that, now the child or the caregiver have to do something, and that's when they're finding out all of these issues were going on for months and sometimes even years. And for families worrying about costs, what are one thing that they can do to protect themselves without hiring a lawyer right away?
What I would say is one of the most important things is to understand what is covered. Go to the policy, read the policy, understand, because not everything's covered. And so if you don't know what you have, you can't make a proper plan in how to protect your aging parent. If you don't know what you have, you can't make a plan for later in life. A lot of people, they overestimate what's covered in their policy and they run out of benefits. Even when they get approved, they run out of benefits very quickly. So it's something that caregivers, ALF owners, and seniors need to fully understand, is what is covered, how much is covered, and then a proper plan can be put in place to get the most out of your coverage.
I love that. And I should also ask, because we know that bringing a lawyer very early on could be the discussion. And I want to remind you watching that they offer a free consultation. Use that. And at some point, you're going to need to bring a lawyer in. When do you believe they should do that?
It's going to be different for everybody. I'm not ever going to say you absolutely need an attorney at the beginning. It's a good idea to, if somebody will review your policy, to let them review your policy for free. Let them, know what you have. A lot of people do come to us early on just because they have difficulty navigating the process. And for those people, it's important to have an attorney at the beginning. They don't want the delay. For other people, it's going to be later on. I would say if the care is urgent, and you need to be approved quickly, that might be something that you want to look into, because at the beginning, it's going to be a lot cheaper to pay an attorney to help you out than it is at the end, when there's already a problem, when you're already trying to get through the slow walking process, or when you're already dealing with a denial, because then you have to submit a demand. You have to appeal the decision. You have to get extra paperwork that you wouldn't necessarily have to get with an application. So in certain urgent situations, some people might find it's beneficial to obtain an attorney. In other situations, it's obvious. You've gotten multiple denials. They're just not approving this claim, and you need somebody to take a look and see if what they're saying is accurate. Many times it's because they're misrepresenting what the policy actually states, and that's the reason for the denial. Other times we've had people come to us after they've been sued by the insurance company, claiming insurance fraud or something of that nature because of the surveillance and things like that, on ridiculous claims from the insurance company. We had a case where there was an individual who had a home health care aide, and they became very close. They're like a family member. She comes in and she takes care of them, and this had been going on for years. And every week she gave a certain amount of care, about, like 40 hours of care. But after several years, it became, some days she'd come at 7 and she'd leave at 3. Some days she'd come at 9 and leave at 6. It just depended on what his care was. He was a quadriplegic. He needs a certain amount of care at different times. And it just became easy for them to fill it out like 9 to 5. And so the insurance company picked up on this, because they were filling out the same thing each time, and put them under surveillance. And even though she wasn't overestimating her hours, she was just easily just saying, okay, 40 hours, and then, giving the same time every day. They were claiming that she was committing fraud, and that the patient was committing fraud. And the whole point of this situation was to get in between the caregiver and the patient, and to, make them scared, and hopefully for them to give up their claims. We were able to resolve that, but they came to us after the surveillance was there. We've also been approached by other people that were actually sued by the insurance company, saying, you owe us $100,000 because we saw you doing X, Y, and Z. And really, when you look at it, X, Y, and Z wasn't all that significant, and it wasn't anything that they said that they couldn't do. So that will happen. Those are rare occasions when the insurance company will actually sue you for fraud, but that would be a time that you'd want to speak to an attorney if that happens.
It's amazing to see the different tactics being used so that our precious seniors are not getting the proper type of help that they need. And it's also refreshing to see how you position yourself to help them. And for aspiring ALF owners and senior living leaders who want to protect themselves legally and financially while helping families and their seniors to protect themselves, what are some advice that you have for them?
The first thing I would say is establish procedures and stick to them. Establish, the first thing is to do a thorough pre-interview with the patient and their caregiver. Obtain the policy. Don't just take their word for it that they have coverage, because sometimes policies lapse. Sometimes they think they have certain coverage and they do not. So it's important to actually get your hands on the policy and read the policy for yourself. And then talk to the caregiver and the patient and let them know what is covered under the policy and what the expectations are for care so that you can make a proper plan of care for them that is within the policy coverage and that will give the senior enough care throughout. Now, one of the things I would say is always confirm after you read the policy, confirm with the insurance company that the policy is in place and that this is the coverage, that there hasn't been any changes to the policy. And then the next step is to talk to the patient and the caregiver about how they intend to pay for coverage during the elimination period, because they must be receiving the service, but they also have to pay for it. The benefits do not kick in till the end of the elimination period. So establish a plan. Is it going to be a payment plan? Is it going to be a sliding scale? Whatever it is, that has to be done and upfront, and you should have a contract that clearly sets that out, that they are responsible during that period, because a lot of families do not know that. They don't realize that coverage doesn't start until the elimination period starts. Another thing that's important is for the ALF owners themselves to understand the elimination period, because an insurance company may tell you it hasn't started yet, and then the patient just runs out of money to pay for coverage. And the elimination period, they say, never runs. We had a client that, she needed assistance with 2 ADLs. One was bathing and the other was transferring. She needed other assistance, but those were the 2 main ones. Before she came to us, she was getting assistance, and the insurance company just kept saying the elimination period hasn't run. They would restart the clock. It kept happening, and they weren't really explaining it in the denial letter. Finally, her family came back to us and said, okay, what's going on? Look at these denials. We started looking into it, and really they were applying the elimination period wrong, and it was clear that they were applying the elimination period incorrectly. Basically, what they were saying is each day that she had to receive assistance with 2 ADLs each day. And because she didn't take a bath every day and she wasn't getting assistance with that 1 ADL every day, they weren't just starting the clock, but they never explained it. And it was clear under the policy that that's not how the elimination period worked. So we were able to stop that, but it was after months of this happening to them. And we were able to get them reimbursed because she did cover the elimination period during that period of time, but the family was ready to give up at that. So the ALF should understand how the elimination period works as well, so that they can advise the family and get coverage, because, what ends up happening is sometimes the family just goes without. They stop getting the services because they can't afford it. Another thing that I would say is everyone should have a documentation plan in place, because that becomes essential. The easiest way to avoid denials after an approval is to keep documenting and document consistently and accurately. Going back to the surveillance issue that we were talking about, because just because they weren't as accurate as the insurance company indicates they should be, there was a significant portion of time where the coverage was denied and they were claiming that they were owed all of this money back. So documentation is key, and there has to be a plan to document consistently, to submit the records consistently, and to also streamline billing, because you want to get your bills out consistently and quickly so that there's never a lapse in coverage or a lapse in payment. Some policies pay, the provider directly, and some policies it's a reimbursement that they pay the insured directly, and the insured then, pays the provider. So know if those the type of policy that you have, and you can sometimes set up automatic payment with the carrier.
That's amazing to hear. As the premium is activated, do they still have to make payments towards the premium Is those two happening at the same time?
Many policies have a waiver of premiums provision in it. Once you qualify for a benefit, then your premiums are waived, but you have to complete the elimination period for you to be eligible for a benefit, and then the premiums will be waived. That's another thing that somebody should look for in the policy, because then they know there's light at the end of the tunnel. If I complete this 3-month elimination period, I get covered benefits and I'm not paying premiums during that period of time.
Yes, because for seniors and people with tight income, it can make a huge difference. Wow, I learned so much. This was so amazing. And you're doing such an amazing work helping everyday people navigating this very hard thing, but very much necessary thing. What keeps you motivated every day to do this?
You know, I see a lot of abuse in the industry. I see a lot of abuse by insurance companies, and when I see a denial, I think of my family. I think of how it would affect me. I think of how it would affect my friends. And then I think about, the people that come to me. A lot of times when people come to us, not usually, but a lot of times, they're desperate. They've been through the ringer already. They've been slow walk through the process. They don't know what to do. They're trying to care for their children and they're trying to care for an aging parent, and they just can't navigate the process. And they're being financially strangled and emotionally strangled by the whole process. And that angers me. It's infuriating sometimes. But at the end of the day, when they do get the care that they need, and they do get a little bit of relief, and they are able to see their parent being cared for appropriately, then it's rewarding. And, I love what I do.
It feels good to serve, and it feels good to fight for those who are not able to fight themselves in that capacity for that specific fight. Because I feel we all need each other. Like, I'm only an expert in this area. You're an expert in another area. And so just like you were helping your fellow lawyer fight that case, it goes to show that we all need each other. And when you can find good people that can help you fight a certain fight that you just don't have the capacity to fight it, it's rewarding to have that. And as the person conducting the fight, it's even double rewarding because you get to make a living while serving someone, and you get to hear those thank yous, and they're priceless. They go so far. Now we are towards the end of the podcast. Are you coming to the ALF Caregivers Conference?
Absolutely. Yes.
January 23rd and 24th. Guys, she is going to be there. But even before the conference, reach out to her. Let her know what was the big aha moment. What was one big takeaway that really helped you or stood out for you? And share this information with your realm. Okay, the people that you know, because it is lack of information that makes people so stressed out and they feel like they're in this world by themselves. You are not in the world by yourself. Okay, you have help, you have resources, but sometimes we come across resources and we don't think to share it because life is happening. Share it. Stop yourself and share it. Any last word for the audience?
I just want to say thank you for letting me join. What you're doing is amazing. This podcast is so important because people out there are desperate and hungry for information. And, you're doing a wonderful service for people out there just needing the information.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'm happy to serve you. I want to invite you to the ALF Caregivers Conference in January. It is going to be a 2-day conference. We listened to you. The last conference, we started with 250 people. We sold out very early on. We were able to add some more people, but we had to say no to so many. But this time we are structuring a 2-day event. We are listening to you, okay? So if there's anyone you want to see, if there's any topics you want to be covered, send us an email. We build our systems in ways to bring solutions to your pinpoints because we enjoy serving you. Until next time, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for spending this time with us. Please consider to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who will find it valuable. Until next time, see you soon. This video is brought to you by the Florida Assisted Living and Caregivers Conference. It is an annual conference for all those who want to open an assisted living right here in Florida. We bring you all of the who's that will help you achieve your ALF. We have caregivers, we have people that already have their assisted living up and running, and they are here for resources. We have caregivers caring for mom and dad at home, but lack resources, so they show up for more resources. We have investors that are in the room looking for partnerships because they don't necessarily want to manage, but they are looking for someone to do the day-to-day while they can do the other investments. We also bring to you all of the sub-industries, those providers that help you get your ALF up and running, the providers that will come to your ALF to provide services to your seniors. We bring everyone in the room for the first time. This event normally sells out. Click the link in the description and I will see you in the room.